Welcome to Moving Conversations, a podcast for movement professionals by movement professionals. If you coach, train, or teach movement, Pilates, or fitness, then this podcast is for you. With more than 60 years of experience in fitness and Pilates, your hosts, Brian Ritchie and Nora St. John, explore the science of human movement, diving deep into the facts, myths, and common misconceptions, hoping to spark thought and conversation about how we view fitness and movement. Now, let's jump into Moving Conversations. And welcome back to Moving Conversations. I'm Brian Ritchie. Joining me as always is Nora St. John. Good morning, Nora. How are things?
I'm very well, Brian. I just came back from Charleston, South Carolina, where I was teaching advanced movement principles for the upper body. And I had the joyful experience of there's a giant cicada brood coming out.
Ooh, fun.
I'm from California. If you are from California, you know bugs aren't really a big thing here. They're just not a big thing here. In the Southeast, they're a thing. So I walked out of my apartment, this little apartment in Midtown, right? I walked out of my apartment and there was these bugs are, I'm not exaggerating, solid 3 inches, giant wings and like about this wide. So they're pretty big. Yep. And they make this giant noise. So I walked out of my apartment and there's about 4 of them like, and I'm like, oh my God, what is happening? So I had one of those moments, those bug moments. But otherwise it was great.
I have a story about that. First time I got here, I got to Washington, D.C. It was right after I graduated college, like the day after I graduated college. I arrive, and it was one of those broods that I think it was like the 17-year brood here in Washington, D.C.
This is a 17-year one, yeah.
Which gets bad.
Yes.
And the tree outside of my apartment had this buzzing and humming. And I literally thought we were close to an electric line or something. I'm thinking, right. I'm going to get cancer. Something's up. I don't know what this buzzing is. And everybody's saying, those are cicadas. And I said, what? And I come from an island. I'm used to cockroaches and big ones that fly. So
you got
they
bugs.
Don't scare me.
Yeah. Yeah.
These things are frightening looking. They dive bomb you. They do aim for you. They are dumb as rocks.
Yes.
They are so idiotic. But I found this out about cicadas. They are evolutionarily one of the most advanced species around because when they burrow for every 17 years. They don't give any other species a chance to become a natural predator. So birds can't, they can't populate enough to get rid of them because they're gone.
Right.
And then when they come back in such abundance that the birds can't get them all. And so it's one of these things that evolutionarily, they're actually pretty smart creatures.
Population overload. We're just going to have so many people out there, so many bugs out there that they will have a chance to mate. And then they're going to bury themselves for 17 years. So nobody gets used to having them as a food source. What
exactly. Isn't it crazy? Yeah. DC has them and we hate them. It makes walking outside so unpleasant and the noise is unbelievable. So
the noise is so loud.
I feel bad for Charleston. I feel bad for them because I remember that experience almost made me go back to Hawaii. It was almost like, forget it. I'm out of here. I can deal with cockroaches, but these big fly, and they said it's like a month at 6 weeks is not a big deal. It was a big deal. So I can relate.
Oh man, it's so funny. Bugs. Anyway.
Yeah.
Speaking of bugs, so we always discuss what are we going to talk about? And what we thought to talk about today was hips and working with clients with hip issues and how you understand and analyze hip issues. And Brian's going to mention some tests that you do for hip issues and then some strategies. Both of us have had the really positive experience of keeping clients from having a relatively early hip replacement just through proper movement and mobility and strength training. So we'll talk a little bit about that too, because hips are kind of complicated, and I think it's worth another discussion. I'm sure you've had one before, but this is another focus on the hip and understanding the hip.
Well, this is more case study oriented, but before we jump into that, remind you, please hit that like and subscribe button. If you hit for those of you who don't know this about podcasts, if you hit the subscribe button and follow the show, it's in your feed and automatically downloads each week. So that way on Tuesday morning, you're heading to work or whatnot, heading on the treadmill. We're already there. You don't have to think about it. And you can hear our next episode. Please, we'd love it. The more people that subscribe, the better it is for us, algorithmic, and all those things that I don't really understand, but I've been told tell people to do this. So please, we appreciate it. Always comment if you can, if you see us on social media. It also helps us jump into other people's pages. So we really appreciate that. Instagram is probably where we're the most prolific, as well as Facebook. Moving Convos is where we are on Instagram. And you can always reach us at movingconvos@gmail.com. So that's behind us. Oh, and we're taking it on the road. We should probably let people know again. I saw our thing on Instagram. We shot a little promo video about this, but why don't you tell us where we're going to be heading in September?
We will be at Blue Moon Pilates in Mission Viejo, that's Southern California, the OC, for those of you who know Orange County or California. We'll be there September 13th and 14th. We'll be doing a full day on the low back on Saturday, the first day, and then a half day on the shoulder on Sunday, and then a half day on osteoporosis on Sunday. And this is Brian and I teaching together. So we'll do a little bit of back and forth on theory, and then Brian will take, let's take a little bit more of a personal training / Pilates approach, mat work, some equipment work, etc. I'll be in the Pilates studio doing more Pilates work, and then we'll switch. So you get a really nice balance of the two modalities, some things you can use as homework, some things you can use as assessments, and a whole bunch of exercises you can use for your clients with any of those conditions.
Yeah. And it's easy to get to. I mean, Orange County is one of those airports. I got to tell you, I remember the first time I went, I always like getting to airports early because I like to walk, and I figure I'll get some walking in. I walked from one part of the airport to the next in about 6 minutes. And I was thinking, oh, this is it. So when I tell you TSA is easy, it's an easy airport to fly in and out of. There's tons of flights going in and out of there. It's real simple. It's a beautiful part of the country. So in September, where it's still hot in a lot of other areas, it's going to be warm, but it's going to be really beautiful there. So if you are from another part of the country and just want to come and hang out with us and play and get a little mini vacation at the same time and learn a whole lot, please look it up, bluemoonpilates.com. You can see all about the course and register there.
And you can join, bring your friends, bring your family, go to the beach, because it's a gorgeous, gorgeous time to be there. It's really one of the nicest times to be in Southern California if you're beach excited at all, which I grew up down there. So that's always my favorite month. All right. So on to the hip.
All right. So
hip here.
I'm going to bring up a case study. I had a new client start 3 weeks ago. I've seen her 3 times, assessment plus 2 sessions. She came in. She first called and she said that she's 50 years old and she is having hip issues and has been told by the doctor she needs a hip replacement. Now, just for those who are listening, who are thinking, that sounds awful young to be having a hip replacement. You're right, it is. I'm going to say some things about her. Female, female, 50 years old, average height, Asian. And I say that because of the pelvic, they usually have a little bit more of a posterior pelvic tilt. She's not, 98 pounds. She's an average sized person. So she also does not have osteoporosis. So it's not any of those things that I would normally immediately think, okay, you may have some bone degradation from maybe being on prednisone for extended periods of time or something like that. She was not a former dancer, nothing that would wear out the joint. She's very sedentary. She's an office, executive type. So she sits at a desk all day. So she's not a movement person whatsoever. So when she said this, a lot of red flags came up in my head thinking, okay, is this a surgeon who is just ready to cut people? And there are surgeons out there who that's their modality of choice. That's how they treat people. I know how to cut and I'm going to cut. And that's fine. That's their shtick and whatnot. But I thought, okay, well, have you come in and let's take a look. Let's see what's going on. And I got to say that when I did her assessment, she definitely had an interesting gait. She did not fully extend in that hip. It's her right hip. She flexed okay, but she did not extend very well. She definitely had, it was a very pronounced limp in walking. Walking does bother her for any prolonged period of time because she does have a limp. There was no real leg length discrepancy that was obvious. Okay. Obviously I didn't measure through an x-ray or anything, but through just common looking, nothing that looked out of the ordinary that way. There's a couple of muscle testing that we'll explain in a few minutes that I did that actually lit up. And I thought, oh, okay. These say that there may be something going on. The range of motion was incredibly limited, incredibly limited.
Which ranges?
Mainly external rotation. So there's something called a Faber test, which is you have someone lying on their back, you take their foot, bend it to 90 degrees, or they bend their knee to 90 degrees so their foot is next to the other foot, and you let it roll out to the side. Okay, some people cross it over the knee, some people keep it on the table, you just let that fall out, and it shows external rotation of the hip. People who are pre-hip replacement often will have a real limited range of motion, and it'll just lock up. It'll go 5 degrees, and that's no more. In other words, they can't cross their leg to put on their shoe. They can't do things that normal people would be able to do with an externally rotated hip. And she was not able to move that out at all. 5 degrees is what we got, 5 to 7 degrees. And that was sort of one of those, oh, well, maybe the doc's right. I mean, this is a good possibility that she does have something going on here. The difference is those people normally that are pre-hip replacement that I've worked with who fail the Faber test, when it locks up like that, it feels like they've hit a wall. It feels like, because bone on bone, they don't really feel anything, but it feels like that's it. It stops. And
it's a hard end feel. It
it's
doesn't
a hard
feel
end.
like there's no squish. There's no, like, I could go farther, but I just feel
no
tight.
stretch.
It's just done.
Right.
Yeah.
And she didn't, and for her, it was tightness. She said, it feels so tight. I can't move. And she said tightness, not a hard end feel. So that was my initial thinking. Oh, well, maybe there's something more here. Maybe there's something.
Tightness in the inner hip, like the inner thigh, or tightness
inner thigh area. Inner thigh area.
Yep.
So that was one of those things in my brain thinking, oh, maybe something that can be done. Don't know. Again, it's not my job to diagnose anything. It's my job to watch range of motion and to see how they move. So in watching her, I thought, okay, that didn't work. She could go across the midline fairly well. And that often people that need hip replacements can't.
Right.
But even with a leg straight in abduction, she locked up. And she said, it just feels really tight. And I mean, her hip would move. She would see pelvic movement, but you wouldn't see it from the hip joint. So that was telling me, okay, there's something going on within the joint itself. And could it be bone on bone? Absolutely. But she has good flexion. She has all these other, ranges of motion with no problem, but she's definitely locking up. So that's what I saw during that initial encounter.
Okay, so just to wrap that up, so she didn't have external rotation. So in the Faber test, right, you bring the knee up, you put the bent knee foot next to the other knee, and then saying that because I think you said foot to foot. So just to clarify that,
foot to knee. Sorry, yes.
Yeah, and then abduction.
Yep.
Abduction with the hip flexed or with the leg straight.
With the leg straight, lying supine.
So supine to just take the leg out to the side and wouldn't go. Okay. All right.
Exactly.
So locked up to the side.
Yep.
It'll go across the midline. It'll internally rotate. It'll flex. It won't extend a whole lot, as you said, from the gate. All right. Good. Yep. That clarifies a few things. All right.
Exactly. She's been through physical therapy before. Now, let's go through some of her past history. She has multiple children, C-section. But that was not an issue, supposedly. I think one was, but that was not necessarily an issue, but she doesn't really have much feeling of her abdominals because of that. So I said, okay, that's fine. She had, just before the pandemic, she had really, really bad nerve pain down the opposite leg, down her left side, down her left leg. She had some nerve compression somewhere. The doctor said it was in her low back. So it was running down her leg. She couldn't remember exactly how far down, but she said it went down my leg. Cool. Okay. Went through physical therapy, got that taken care of. Pandemic hit, didn't move that much as well. Things calmed down, and she hasn't had any back problems since. She said there's nothing, no nerve, everything's fine. She said, but because of that, she feels that she was starting to use the other side more, favor the right side, because that's the side that hurts now. So she was leaning on that side, using that side a lot more. And, that side started feeling a lot tighter afterwards. And in physical therapy, they tried to get her to do hip flexor stretching and things. And the only one that they would teach her is basically like the Thomas test, where she's lying at the edge of a bed with a knee in toward her chest and letting her other leg just drape off the end. It's a great hip flexor stretch, but it's an end range stretch that some people, it doesn't work necessarily for.
It's also hard to stabilize the low back in that position, especially if you're doing it by yourself on a bed.
Bingo.
So it's not, and it's kind of weirdly open chain, unlike a lunge stretch, for example, which at least has some places you can control better from.
Precisely. And that's actually one that I gave her this last session, that she said, oh, I actually feel the stretch. She never felt it before. And just having her kneeling and 1 foot forward and that lunge position and just pelvic tilt and moving forward a little bit, she goes, oh, I can actually feel the hip. Okay. And again, holding the position. It took about 10, 15 seconds before she said, oh, now I start to feel it. So there was so much guarding in that hip. Yeah. There's a lot of guarding. Yeah. And that was one of those things that made me think, okay, the guarding is something else. Maybe the guarding is what's going on with the range of motion. So that's sort of what she's done up until the time she walked in with me. So what I started working with her on is external rotation, knee fallout. So lying on her back and let a knee just go as far as you can, externally rotate and bring it up on 12 on each side. And she actually said that when she does that, and I noticed this myself, first repetition, she went out about 5 degrees. By the 10th rep, she was out maybe 10 degrees. So I saw a visible change.
Not a hard end feel. You've got some give there.
Exactly. Yeah. So it wasn't going up against a wall. Again, if it was right at 5 or 7 degrees and there was a wall, that you weren't going to get any additional.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I'm saying I have hope. I'm not promising anything. And I told her that at the beginning. I said, look, I don't know. I said, we will work on movement and we will work on strengthening, but I said, I think we need mobility in that area, but we're going to do what your body will let us do. And we can't do anything more.
Yeah.
Did a bunch of things supine. I found even doing marching was challenging for her because she would naturally want to flex her spine rather than bring her knee into flexion.
Yeah.
In a supine position. So I put her on the trap table and I put the springs. So I basically gave her a load to pull her into flexion. So it's passive. And I put a yellow spring and it was a decent amount. And I saw a lot greater range of motion. She went a lot further because she didn't have to try. It sort of pulled her. And I kept using the terms that we've talked about here about floating. Let that knee float up, not pull it. Let your knee float up and then push it down. And when she pushed it down, even with the yellow, she says, wow, I feel my glutes. I'm like, with a yellow? Wow. Okay. I said, that's good. Perfect. And I kept that. And I found that worked. So I thought, okay, we may get some knee circles. Then, and you probably were already onto this, I put her in quadruped. And I had her just do hip rocking forward and back.
Yep.
And I got a lot more range of motion. No pain, but a lot more range of motion. Neutral spine, working on hip flexion as she rocked her hips backwards and then forward. And again, more repetition. She went farther and farther and farther by the 12th rep. So it's like, okay. Then I had her go side to side in quadruped. Okay, that was harder. That was a lot harder. But again, by the 5th, 6th, 7th rep, I'm seeing a few more degrees range of motion, but a lot of guarding. Then I had her do circles in the same thing. So basically all the stuff that I was thinking of doing supine, but realized, oh, there's too much guarding. She's locked up. I was able to get her to do quad.
Helps.
Closed chain.
It was, and you're also short lever closed chain, right? Because all you have is the femur moving, and it's kind of like you just really are focusing on that one joint. You don't have the knee, the elbow, or whatever other parts you're working on. That's
exactly.
Great.
Yeah. But also, sometimes I find that if you distract, so I'm not going to tell her, to take your knee out to the side that it doesn't want to do. I'm going to give her a different thing by saying, move your hip instead.
Exactly.
So now her brain is moving and she's moving that way, but the guarding is different.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. We talk about that a lot. I mean, it's one of the things that we always used to do with the all fours. And the things I still do is it's kind of like the key thing there that I always thought of was clients, for example, who don't want to rotate at all, right? Or who don't really want to side bend at all. Like that's kind of typical for low back pain or other things. You put them in all fours and you do what we call the tail wag, right? Both knees on the ground, lift one foot up. Then you internally rotate that leg and look towards the foot. So you're side bending. Clients who would not in a million years be willing to side bend when they're seated or standing are side bending without thinking about it. They're not thinking they're side bending. They're just looking at their foot. And so again, it's a little bit of distraction, and it's also getting them to do the movement in really kind of the safest, most controlled way possible. Maximum closed chain. Hands are on the ground, knees are on the ground, and you really have control. Great.
And that's exactly how I explained it to her. As I said, here's the safest body position for you. Yes, I said it's pretty much unloaded for your spine, so we're taking care of your back. You're really not loading it very much. And for your hips, I said, think of it this way: you're in this exact same position where your knee is as you are when you bring it into flexion, where your hip locks up. But now you're in a closed chain position. You're putting pressure through it, and you're able to move. So, I mean, I got to tell you, the whole time I'm watching this, I'm giddy like a schoolgirl. I'm just like, I'm seeing things and I'm so happy. And she's looking at me and I said, forgive me. I said, but I see movement. I see hope.
Yeah. I said,
I wasn't sure. Again, first session, mainly supine. And I'm like, man, I'm seeing a little bit of movement. I'm seeing a little bit of hope, but not as much as I was hoping for. I was trying a lot of different things, but then I just said, you know what? Put her on the trap table. Let's load her differently. Okay, that's working. What if I do quadruped? Sideline wasn't going to work. And then when she got up, she actually was moving differently. I didn't put her through a lot of hip extension. I did like foot slides in quadruped because I figured I got you in quadruped. Let's do foot slide. And I did that and she was able to. And she said, oh, I could do this. And I said, perfect. That's as far as I need you to go for now.
Awesome.
Let's have you do a little lengthening of the muscle and then bring it back in. A little lengthening and bring it back in. And she said, oh, this feels good. I said, okay. I said, that's enough. I said, it's a touch and go. I don't want to overload the muscles. I don't want to overload your neurologic system and have everything freak out, and especially additional guarding later. I said, let's touch it and then move on. Let's touch it and move on.
Yep. The kiss and ride plan, I sometimes say.
Exactly. Exactly.
Just say hello, and then move on.
And that's exactly how I was looking at it. And I thought, okay, but it told me, all right, if this is working, I was looking at the reformer, and of course my brain is like, I could do this and this and this and this. And I'm like, no, stop.
Not today. Leave it be.
Today. Let it be. Let's just start with one or two new things, see how she feels. And I was waiting to hear back from her, later in the day or tomorrow sort of thing, going, okay, was there a reaction? Was she not able to walk? I mean, we've all had those clients that they leave. Thinking, I feel great. And in the morning, they're like, my hip won't move at all.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what this teaches me and what I wanted to sort of bring up here is thinking outside the box sometimes can make a huge difference, especially with the hip, because sometimes taking it from a position that I would have thought supine should have been completely almost neutral-ish. As soon as she lifts that leg, that hip flexor is binding and holding her up and everything shut down. By putting her into a different position, suddenly that hip flexor sort of like, oh, I guess I don't have to work here. So suddenly I could bypass it. It's like, yes, all right, we're on the right track.
So you put her in a position where you're going to get the minimum amount of guarding. Yeah. So again, just to kind of bring out a little bit more of what you were saying. The other thing too about particularly kneeling for the hip is that also really puts the femur into the acetabulum, right? It creates a lot of joint congruency, which I've had clients who have hip dysplasia, where basically the ball is too big and it doesn't really fit well in the socket. And those clients don't do well in open chain work.
Yeah.
because it's almost like the ball is too wiggly in there. I don't know if that's her case, but like that's something I would think about. It's like it sounds like she does much better when you really have that femur connected into that acetabulum, which you do in all fours.
Yeah.
And that's, so that's another thing I think about, along with just the lack of guarding and the support. It's also like really helps that joint to move with integrity. The fact that she had no pain also in all fours, moving in all those different directions, it's like that should have banged up against some part of that acetabulum that's irritated.
And that was my thought.
Yeah, because that's the other thing. It's like usually one of those things is going to jam you up against an osteophyte or whatever's going on in there.
And that
so
was
that's interesting too.
That was the other thing. With a knee, it's a little easier because you can say when you're weight bearing, when you're standing, is it lighting you up? Does it feel like a dull toothache that never goes away?
Right.
And I said that, and the hip, it can be like that because all you need, I said, is the head of a pin. That amount of where the two bones are meeting, you don't need much. But if you move out of that position, suddenly the pain goes away. Usually those are the hips that will catch. They'll go into that range of, and they'll find a way to avoid it.
Yep.
So I was wondering about that. I said, have you ever had that standing? Never. You've never had any pain in a standing position, weight bearing? No. Okay. It's only through movement. It's only that external, it's only locked up. But she's never had any pain in any of that. All of her pain feels more muscular, muscles tightening, muscle stretch, muscle pull, all of that.
So she's limping, not from avoiding a painful position of the joint, or at least in her way of expressing it.
In her way, yes, of saying
right. But it's like the muscles won't let her go into the range that she needs to go into. So the limp is caused more by, see, this is interesting.
You can see where I felt.
Yeah.
I'm a weirdo, and I think all of us who are part detectives are when it comes to I tell people it's kind of like being a body detective because I love this stuff.
It is.
The weirder the case, the more excited I get because look, you give me a rotator cuff all day long. I can do it's too easy because I've seen 1,000 of them. I like the cases that are going to be more challenging where it's like, okay, it challenges me to find out some different things and also to push my brain for creativity because now I see, all right, this helped. Quadruped really worked. Loaded on the springs worked. But what that taught me about quadruped was I put her in a stable position. Yes. She's more stable. Now, she's already stabilized that joint, over-stabilized and standing and things. Everything is bound up.
But not well.
Muscular, not well.
The stabilization is not effective or functional. It's really just bracing, right? Exactly. It's just bracing and blocking. It's not actually stability. She's trying to create stability ineffectively.
And she actually said that about her back. She said everything just seized up and I couldn't move. And I said, see, your body wants to be stable. And I said, I think that's what's happening in this hip is it doesn't know how to stabilize. So instead,
everybody's going,
just said, I gotcha. And now everybody's clamping down. So I said, so what we need to do is remind it, you can move. It's okay. We need to sort of coax it and say, look, this range of motion is fine. You'll be fine doing this. And I found that with the low back, especially, that really does work when you put them in a position where they can move freely. They're like, oh yeah, I can move.
Yeah,
so I'm trying
I don't have to brace within an inch of my life. Yeah.
Right. So that's kind of what I'm trying to get at with her, is trying to get her in that feeling that, okay, we're doing this. You know, we can move forward and back. We can move a little side to side. We can move with hip circles. And, you know, and I'm thinking maybe closed chain is really where it's going to be at for her for a while, as we increase her range of motion and her strength and her muscular stability and joint integrity.
And her movement pattern re-education. Because at this point, she's got some funky movement patterns that she's locking into for safety, for her own body's feeling of safety, that are not helping her. So
and
it's
I've
also
been
like,
there for so long.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this has really been 2 years of fighting for her.
Wow.
That she's been clamping down on this, and she has 2 fairly young children. So it's not as though she, you know, she's an active, you know, like I said, she's a high level, you know, executive. Plus, besides that, she has 2 small children. So
Okay.
there's a
Well,
lot going
she's doing
on.
something. She's being more active than just pure sedentary. Just
Right.
because, with two small kids, you have to lift and move and, pack them up and things like
Precisely.
that. Yeah.
Precisely. And that's why when she said she needed a hip replacement, it just sort of rang, bells went off. And you and I have talked about that before because I've had other clients who've come to me and said, "Oh yeah, I need a hip replacement." And my first thought was, "You're 45."
Right.
Now,
What's going on?
if I've had dancers before that
Yeah.
were at very high levels or were, part of companies, professional. Okay, you wore that bugger out. Okay, that's gonna
Right.
happen.
Exactly. That's called overuse.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that joint has been overused, and you know what? You got what you got. Okay, you got to get it replaced. Great. We're going to stabilize. We're going to do what we can do. We're going to strengthen you before the surgery. We're going to really strengthen you after. And usually they do very well because they know their body and they want
Yeah.
to get back to movement. And as long
Yeah.
as you keep them, I'm going to say it this way, keep them within their safety box, keep them within their safety
Hmm.
zone with the replacement, because some dancers, they are so used to feeling that extreme hypermobility range of motion that you kind of have to say, okay, you got to make that box a little smaller now and not feel as though your leg can go over your head. There's no reason for you to do that. It's 50 years old, necessarily, but we want to keep it within a safety zone so that you don't overwork the joint. So you're going to need a revision down the road, hopefully, cross our fingers. But if it's not someone like that, and it's not someone who has worn out the joint, that usually tells me that there's something else going on. So that's usually what's going on in my brain.
So I want to bring up a couple things. One was I had a client who was a park ranger. So she had spent many, many, many years hiking everywhere.
Yeah.
That was her job, was walking everywhere on all kinds of terrain. And they were saying, I think it's hip replacement time for you. And why I wanted to bring her up was she was positive for the Faber test. It was definitely like we're done. That range of motion did not improve in anything that we did. So I just want to contrast this with
Oh,
somebody.
yeah.
And when she was closed chain, like when she was standing, when she was kneeling, that's when her pain was worse.
Mm-hmm.
So in her, and I just want to contrast this because what you've got, it sounds much more muscular.
Mm-hmm.
When it was, in this case, it was clearly in the joint. The only things we could do were open chain. So supine, leg slides and rotation, feet in straps with a lot of support, movement in all directions, just trying to get some strength going and some mobility going. But open chain, in her case, allowed that joint to open up enough so those osteophytes weren't jamming against each other and causing pain.
Yep.
So just to throw a totally different situation. And in her case, we really had to work on minimizing any kind of closed chain, any kind of joint compression in her case. And that's the complete opposite of what you've got going on.
Yeah. And
right?
I will say this, I've had a number of those, and usually they are older individuals in general, just in general, not always, but often they're in their 60s or beyond. What usually is one of the biggest things for me, not only do they have pain when they stand or kneel, but one of the easiest ways is a technique called distraction, where literally in a supine position, I just grab their foot and just pull a little bit. Literally, I lean backwards. I'm not yanking it out of the joint. I'm just distracting it. So I'm taking like a millimeter within the joint. And every one of them, you see the look on their face of, oh my gosh, that's amazing. And I mean, I've had clients say, can we do this for the whole hour?
Exactly.
And I will literally put their leg or put their foot between my legs so I can squeeze, and I will just lean back just a little bit. So I'm taking the pressure off, and then we'll talk for 5 minutes. And for them, that gives them so much relief that they'd pay for the hour just for that 5 minutes.
So
frankly.
Variation on this one that I've done a lot on the trap table, particularly. You need a trap table, not a tower for this. I take the short, usually blue, sometimes red springs if they're a taller person or a heavier person. Take the horizontal slider, put it a little bit towards their head, not right over the knees, usually a little bit towards their head. Put the straps on. I often will have like one of those triangular pillows under their knees. right? Just to be there. And then I'll basically strap them up so that they're suspended. Right. So it's the same thing. It's distraction, but in this case, the machine's doing it. Then sometimes I'll just hold both of the springs in one hand and just very gently wiggle it back and forth. It's the same thing. They're just like, oh my God, that is the best thing that ever happened to me. Another little trick in the Pilates studio is if you have a mat, or if you have like the belly strap on the trap table or a tower, if you've got that, I'll put their feet under that. And then like have them basically slide away so that it's, it's kind of doing a little bit of traction on its own, just by holding their feet in one position while they move away from it. But I found that either your version, which I've used a lot, or suspending them with relatively tight springs from overhead is just like, again, magic. And this is the case where it is the joint compression that's the problem. That's not your client's issue, right? Just to get us back to the case study.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, when you have that compression that causes the pain, it's really that telltale sign. And it does. You ask them what it feels like, and they often will say, it just hurts. And I'll usually use the toothache example. I'll say, does it sort of feel, because toothache is nerve. And when you have that bone-on-bone chondral nerve pain, it has that sort of connotation in their brain. And they'll say, yes, and I say, okay. And it's nonstop. It never goes away unless it can be distracted, and usually in an open chain position. So a lot of times I'll have them stand on a platform or something with their good leg, the one that's not in pain, and just have them hang the other one off the side and let it swing back and forth. It's a pendulum like we do for the rotator cuff, but it's for the leg.
Yeah.
And they'll say, this feels good. This feels all right. I'll say, great. Perfect. And it's open chain if you think about it, because it's not touching anything. And sometimes I can get them to kick a little forward, a little back, a little to the side, and we can do a little bit of strengthening that way if it's appropriate for the client. But again, for the other client who doesn't have that bone-on-bone pain, doesn't have in the Faber test either has full range of motion or feels more tightness, more like the inner thigh is just holding them all together. That usually is an indication in my mind that, okay, we may be able to accomplish something, but I always preface it with them. I say, look, we're going to do whatever your body will allow us, because I don't know how long this has happened. I don't know if it's been 20 years. It may be we got what you got. And your body is going to tell me what we can do. And that's something we need to do, is respect that.
So I've worked with a whole bunch of clients with that positive Faber test in various different ways, right? And for some clients, like another way that I'll see it, if I'm not doing the Faber test specifically, is the butterfly stretch, seated up, feet together, and then seeing how far the knees fall out.
Yep.
Right. And sometimes one knee is like way
straight up,
straight up, and the other one is falling out. And with these are clients who do not really have a lot of obvious hip pain. I mean, I'm thinking about a particular set of clients. They don't really have a lot of hip pain. They just have zero range there. And one of the things that I think, anyway, one of the logical paths down which I have fallen when this has happened is I say, okay, so what's happening? And my first thing was, I'm going to stretch the AD ductors. That didn't get me anywhere. Then I was like, okay, what I have to do is I actually have to get the psoas, the iliopsoas, to stop locking up. So that's where, like what you were doing in terms of the all fours, going into flexion, coming into a little bit of like, not really extension because you're in all fours, but moving through that range, getting the psoas to work dynamically, I have often found is the thing that helps to unlock that area. And it sounds like that's where you were headed as well.
Absolutely.
And one little thing, again, this is from the Pilates repertoire. There's a reverse abdominals facing the back of the reformer. So you're kneeling, your knees are against the shoulder rest, your hands are on the rails. And
I was thinking about this one.
Yeah, you can keep it as light as you want, but basically you're doing hip flexion generally above 90. So you're getting into where the iliacus and the psoas are most active in terms of hip flexion. And I played with that with a bunch of clients. And then I was playing with this one client with all these weird hip things going on. And I started to play with slight external rotation and slight medial rotation in that position. So from all fours, basically bringing the toes together.
Yeah.
Okay. So your knees are wide. And so what my thinking there is the hip flexors. We have our iliopsoas, which is, primarily an external rotator and a hip flexor and adductor. So there's things that go on there. You've got the sartorius, which is an external rotator and hip flexor. You've got the tensor fascia lata and the gluteus minimus, which are hip flexors and internal rotators.
Yep.
And a lot of times what I found is if I work that both, again, slightly turned out, so the toes are together, and then slightly wide, so the feet are just at the edge of the carriage. It's not a lot of rotation, just a little bit.
All you need is a little.
Exactly. It's just a tiny change. And that was a really nice way to work that hip in a variety of ways. And I could put a yellow spring on if I needed to, right? I can go as light as I need to just to get the mobility going against a little bit of resistance. That was super helpful. And one other piece I'll add to that is a lot of my clients with just kind of lower level hip issues than your client does get a lot of tenderness and fatigue in basically tensor fascia lata gluteus minimus area. That lateral hip, just it burns, it locks up, it just feels funky. And this was another way to also work on that, because what I found was that was over responsive when the iliopsoas wasn't doing its job. And especially if that's like the leg they cross over when they sit, so they're doing internal rotation and hip flexion, or if there's somebody who, when they walk, internally rotate, or run particularly, internally rotates that hip to bring it into hip flexion instead of bringing it straight. So just a little piece that I wanted to add to that, because if with those muscular issue in terms of that lack of range, sometimes really getting a dynamic psoas action going has made a big difference.
Yeah. I was thinking about, my brain is always thinking like 10 steps ahead as well. And I was thinking about the chair, getting flexion in the chair, standing first, not seated, but standing and having it help her lift.
Exactly. Lift it up.
Get to that 90 and beyond, things like that. And I was thinking actually about on the reformer, the reverse abdominal. I was looking at that thinking, okay, I like that, and keeping it very light. I hadn't thought about the internal and external rotation, which I can even do in a rocking on their quadruped. They can just have their toes touching or splayed out. So I'm thinking, that's a good idea. That might be a good way to introduce that to that next step.
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
Yeah. And now keep in mind, this is an advanced case. This is not something that you're probably going to see necessarily in your practice or with your parents or something like that. What I often see when it comes to I'm pre-hip replacement is the 45-year-old who has been told that they have hip pain and they may have a little bit of hip impingement. And of course, the doctor wants to go in immediately and is like, oh, you've got a labral tear. We're going to go in, we're going to replace the hip. We're going to take care of all that. And it's like, are you sure you want to do that? And I have had tremendous success working with those clients, just strengthening the hip and reminding the muscles of what to do, especially the abductors. I'm thinking of a client now that came to me who he's light. He's about 5'6", 5'7", maybe 150 pounds, not overweight, decent shape. He decided to take up yoga because yoga is good for you. And this yoga instructor wanted him to go to extreme ranges of motion. And one of the things that he was doing is having him go at feet as wide as possible, standing straight up as wide as possible, and then hinging forward at the hips.
Right.
Okay. And what he discovered was having his feet be as wide as possible was actually causing hip impingement, especially rotating forward and coming back up and doing that, and then turning his hips. And because I was asking him, I said, just tell me what you were doing. And he said, well, this one. And as soon as he took his legs out to a certain point, he said, this one always hurts. I said, well, yeah, don't do that. Stop. Feet don't go that wide on your body.
Don't do that. Exactly.
Don't do that. Let's back that off. And he was literally 6 weeks away from hip replacement surgery when he started with me. And I said, look, give me 3 weeks. You can always cancel the surgery. Give me 3 weeks. And if you're feeling a little better, you can postpone it maybe. And I said, just keep an open mind. I'm not going to tell you to not do it. I'm just going to say, keep an open mind, but it sounds more muscular. And I said, and something to always think about is when they replace anything and they go in for surgery, you're basically coming out of the surgery without your original parts. And there's always issues without your original parts. So I said,
right.
if you ever had something replaced on your car or in your house, original parts work better than replacement parts. And he got the metaphor. And he said, oh yeah, that makes sense. So I said, okay, you understand that. So in putting him and getting him stronger in 3 weeks, he said, yeah, my pain's gone down like 80%. But I still think I might have to I said, give me another week. Keep doing the exercises at home. You know, I have him 7-way hips. I basically have strengthened the heck out of his abductors. And he was 2 weeks out and he said, I think I'm going to postpone it. I said, ask him for 3 months. Just say 3 months. And then in 2 months, he said, I have no hip pain anymore. I said, then why are you having surgery? He said,
I don't have surgery.
Yeah. And I said, I said, keep in mind, I said, you're not hurting the doctor's feelings. I said, so many people are afraid of hurting the doctor's feelings that, well, I don't, it's late. I don't want to I said, trust me, they can fill that spot. They've got a long line of people that
they've got a long wait. That's why you're waiting for 3 months.
Right.
Presumably they can slot somebody in a little sooner if they need to. And if not, that's not your problem. I mean, honestly.
Right. Exactly. And I said, that slot is going to be booked 2 minutes after they contact you. They're going to text someone or call them and they're going to take that slot. A 65-year-old who is in agony every step they take. They're going to go in for the hip replacement instead. And that was years ago. This was pre-pandemic. So we're talking 2019 or 18, and he still hasn't needed a hip replacement. And I've had a number of clients like that. I'm sure you have too, where when you strengthen them properly, the pain begins to go down, lessens and lessens and lessens. And, you know, at first it was, okay, it doesn't hurt today, but then it hurt a little bit tomorrow. Okay. As I tell people, I may not be able to take that away entirely. We're going to strengthen you. We're going to work on movement. I said, I'm not in charge of that. I can just have you move better and get you stronger. But if we can lessen the severity of the pain, stretch out the frequency between issues, and shorten the duration when you have those issues, isn't that better? I said, that's my job. When you're stronger, when you're more functional, that's when that seems to work best. And almost everybody almost every injury that I've worked with, they say, yeah, it'll come back and they'll say, oh, and I'll say, how long did it last? A couple days. I said, how long did it last a couple years ago? Oh man, that was months and months. Hi, Al. We had a visitor.
We had a guest.
But yeah, that's our job. If your body is moving properly, if you're strong, if your muscles are strong, properly strengthened, and you have good range of motion and good movement quality, hopefully you can really have those incidents of discomfort or pain stretch out to the point where you don't even remember that you've had it. I've had some people that 2-3 years later, they say, yeah, my back was bothering me. When did that bother me? Oh, wow, that was a long time ago. Say, yeah, congratulations. And this will go away too. And then you'll not think about it again. That's our goal.
That's absolutely our goal. And I always think of 2 different clients. One was a high level, Olympic level shot putter. Okay. So very one-sided, that weird, like rotational thing they do before they to get the speed up. It's my favorite watch shot put. It's an odd movement. And he had some hip pain. And this was way later. He was in his 40s at this point. It was way after that. So it's one person I think about. The other one I think about is a woman who ran backpacking trips in the Sierras. So she was walking on, there's a lot of granite, a lot of uneven surfaces with 20, 30, 40, 50 pounds on her back as she was leading these backpacking trips. And her hips started to hurt, basically. Not a big surprise there. And again, she was in her early 50s, late 40s, and they're talking about a hip replacement, which in her case, that's not great. And one of the things I don't think we've mentioned yet is a hip replacement. They last more than they used to, but they often don't last more than 10 to 20 years max is kind of what I usually hear. So if you're in your late 40s or 50s or 40s and getting a hip replacement, chances are that you're going to have to get another one are high. And the more times they do that, the second and third ones, I've seen a couple, and it's just not pretty at a certain point. So you want to avoid that if you can. And same thing with her. Like, we just worked on strengthening. We did standing work on the reformer. We did a ton of feet and straps. We did basic footwork and just getting, again, the hip three-dimensionally stronger, abductors a lot, adductors a lot, hip flexors a lot. She was like, after 3 months, hip pain was gone. She was back to running trips, and she wasn't sure she'd ever be able to even go back to that job. Yeah. And she's been fine, for the next 15 years. Yep. So a lot of times, start with that. If your clients will give you a chance, like your client did, start with that. Just see if just some strengthening, some mobility work, getting those mechanics good, see if that'll make a difference, because a lot of times it does.
Now, I will say this. There are a couple of instances when a younger person may need a hip replacement that's beyond what, again, when I was younger, I used to think, oh, I can help everybody. I can do anything. And you know what? No, we can help a lot of people, but not everybody.
Yeah.
You said dancers, people who have worn out the joint. Someone like a shot putter may have been landing on that side for so long that they've worn out that joint to the point where, okay, there's not much they can do about that. It's possible, and especially with dancers and people who, go through extreme ranges of motion, etc. The others are those who are on medication. There are certain medications that cause bone breakdown, like prednisone
being one of them, which a lot of people are on. If you've got anybody has an autoimmune condition, anything like that, a lot of times they're on that either continually or regularly, and that really influences bone growth and bone development, not in a good way.
Yeah,
it will lead to bone degradation.
I've had a couple of people who have had multiple hip replacements, both sides at 42 because they've been hepatitis C or something like that, that they've been on low dose prednisone for so long that it caused the bone to really basically it caused them to be osteoporotic in their hips when they were high level athletes. This is the person I'm thinking of was a triathlete. So she was still running, but her bones were thinning out. Eventually they gave out and she had to have them replaced. But again,
thyroid medication as well.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
So
and a lot of people
thyroid seem to there are a lot of them are on that again forever and starting oftentimes not that old. Exactly. A lot of women I know are kind of perimenopause end up on thyroid for various reasons. So they can be on it from the time they're 30, 40, 50, certainly. So that also seems to have an increased incidence of osteoporosis. And one other thing I want to mention is hip dysplasia. I've had 2 clients where literally that joint integrity was just it just wasn't doing anybody any good. And they had a bilateral hip replacement because it was just genetic. Their hips were functionally structured. And the hip replacement made a huge difference in their quality of life. They absolutely needed it. It made a huge difference. But aside from, sort of those circumstances, and you can always try, even with those cases, you can still try through strengthening and mobility and whatever to make things better. And you may, if nothing else, you're going to get them stronger and more prepared for surgery because prehab is a real benefit if somebody's going in for surgery.
Hip replacement, especially. I've had a number of people bounce back within weeks and they think, oh my gosh, I'm back to where I was, before I was ever in pain. And it's been 3 weeks. 4 weeks, and they are right back and they're released from physical therapy so quickly because the person says, you're already strong. You're ready to go.
Good. Yep.
Now, I will say this. If you have someone who has these things, do not hesitate to talk to their physical therapist or their physician.
No.
And the reason I'm bringing this up is I had one gentleman who was told in his early 50s he needed a hip replacement. And he was having other issues like spinal issues, nerve issues, a lot of other things were going on. So he had multiple conditions. But the pain that he was describing in his hip made me just curious. And I said, do you have a copy of your actual x-ray? I'd like to see it. Just curiosity, or MRI. And when I looked, I said, okay, believe it or not, the femur head looked like an egg. It was not rounded. It was pointed. And you could see where it would be pointed. that could wear away the hip joint. And I mean, I
Yeah.
took one look at it and I said, I'm going to talk to your doctor. And I said, do you think that it's, and he said, absolutely. He said, that's the reason he needs the hip replacement. I said, okay. And again, I'm coming from I'm not a medical professional, so I'm not going against the
Yeah.
doctor. It was just one of those things that I was like, okay, then what I want to do is not necessarily going to correct that. Obviously, that's bone on bone. But
Right.
he could not get it through his head that that's really what he needed. And actually, before he had the hip replacement, he had spinal fusion first because he was told, oh, that'll take care of the nerve problem. And I said,
Only if
okay.
it's coming from your back, which
And
it
that's
may
what I
not
said.
be.
And it wasn't. And he, after the surgery, said the
Yeah.
hip problem is even worse. So eventually he
Yeah.
had it, took care of that pain. So again, for him, it was the bone. So don't hesitate talking to their physician or their physical therapist, because they are going to know more about the imaging and about what they've been through with the doctor than we do. So we can only look at what the structure is telling us. They can go a lot further with their tests.
Well, and I don't know about you, but clients they're not always a good communicator of what that doctor said to them and what that actually means for you as a movement person. More than once, I'm kind of like, you have what? Like, it just doesn't
Yeah.
make any sense what they say. It's like,
Mhm.
that doesn't make sense given all your symptoms or whatever. And then I say, look, would you mind if I get an MRI report or talk to your doctor or your PT or whatever? And they tell me a completely different story.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, that definitely happens, and it's not your
Happens all
client's
the
fault.
time.
Yeah. Your client
Mhm.
they don't know what they're talking about and they're trying to interpret often, I mean, not to say bad things about the medical profession, but a rather quick explanation about what's going on. This is what's happening for you. This is why we're doing this. Boom, done. Right.
Yep.
And you don't get the chance to go, what is the femur? What is the acetabulum? What are you talking about? And they don't always have the background to understand all that. So
I
always get more information.
highly recommend you tell your clients this who are seeing a doctor or going in for this. I told this to my parents because they always want me to basically interpret what they've said.
Yes, which is
On
appropriate.
your iPhone, you have a recording feature. Record the entire appointment.
Yeah, that's actually great.
Because then I said, and then just give it to me. I said, if you don't mind, if for a client, I say, if you don't mind, my dad's sort of like, he'll just email it to me and I'll listen to it. And I'll say, oh, what he's saying is this. And I can make it into a little more layman's terms and whatnot. If I understand it, if I don't understand, I'll tell them. But with clients, especially, I can do that. And I can say, look, this way you can review again later. Or if you see another doctor for a second opinion, you can compare and contrast what you're being told and not just, well, I think that's what the first person said, but I'm not 100% sure. You can have that comparison, and that does help.
Well, that's good advice, just because I don't know about you, but when I'm in a doctor's office, I am not always in my body entirely. I was like, it's hard to pay attention when you're a little nervous or they're poking and prodding or, whatever's happening. It's not a time when I am fully relaxed usually. And like, yeah, I've got this. Like, that's not usually the mode I'm in a doctor's office. So again, just recording that means that information, you can review it again when you're a little more relaxed and you're home and then your questions can come up and you can actually get your questions answered,
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
Awesome.
So again, today was more of a case study that we wanted to throw out there because this person literally just started with me and I had some success. Hopefully this can enlighten you a little bit onto, give certain things a try different positions, try open chain versus closed chain. I mean, sometimes your brain gets stuck in one path, and sometimes saying, I'm going to do the exact opposite can actually show a lot of benefits. So, maybe that'll help with you. And maybe it'll just open your mind up to being creative and be, oh yeah, that makes sense. I like that.
It's a little bit of an example of what I call, critical reasoning or clinical reasoning or biomechanical reasoning, right? I think we talked through some nice ways of, like, I'd ask you a question and looking at, okay, what does that mean? And where does that put me in terms of movement? What do I think about when you say that? Like, oh, closed chain works better than open chain or whatever. Those are the tips and the pointers and the tricks that really help make you a more efficient and effective trainer, is when you can start to go, oh, I think that means I want to go in this direction. And then at least you have a path to start down. Yeah. So really nice. Beautiful.
Exactly.
Thanks, Brian.
Well, very good. Very good. Well, hopefully you guys did learn something and it opened your, your mind up a little bit and be like, oh, that's cool. Hopefully it did that for you. Do us a favor, hit that like and subscribe button. We thank you for every single person who comments, for every single person who listens. We are very, very grateful. We would love to interact with you. So hit us up with an email, movingcombos@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you, or through our Instagram. We will answer any questions, comments, anything you put on there. Moving Convos at Instagram as well. So that's it for this week. We will see you all next week. For Nora St. John and Brian, we'll see you then.
Bye, guys.